Hello again, this is Mike with Toy Train Tips and Tricks, and this is the Lionel 6-2317 Operating Drawbridge. This accessory was made from, was cataloged from 1975 through 1981, right in the heart of the Lionel MPC Fun Dimensions era. It is a cool accessory. It was offered not only as a separate sale item, but was also included as part of at least one set in 1976. And a lot of operators and collectors tend to shy away from MPC stuff because of there was a reputation of MPC as being poor quality or junk, and sometimes that is earned, unfortunately. Things like the Sandy Andy gravel loader was a horrible accessory. But sometimes MPC came up with stuff that was pretty innovative, pretty creative, and of decent quality. Now, the 2317 is interesting in that there is no post-war counterpart. Nothing came before this. This was an original MPC design, and as far as I know, it has never been reissued either. So here, this accessory, we're going to take a look at how it works and how it was designed and how we can tweak it for use in more applications than what Lionel originally prescribed. This particular drawbridge is mine from my childhood, and it has had a bit of a rough life. So you're going to see some things here that aren't typical. First of all, in the operation, normally you would have heard a clanging bell as the drawbridge went up or as it goes down. Mine, after 40-some years of operation, the plastic arm that controlled the clanger, it just shattered. And I haven't gotten around to replacing it, and actually I don't know if I will, because honestly I found that bell to be kind of annoying anyway. So I don't know if I'm going to go through the trouble of replacing that part in any case. Also, you'll notice it's screwed down to this masonite board, and that is because somewhere along the line, the original packaging, the original box for this got misplaced. And when my trains were packed away for a few years for college and marriage and things like that, getting the household set up, this particular accessory, it was improperly stored and the base warped. And since it's very important that everything be lined up properly from side to side, having a warped base was bad, so I screwed it to this masonite base so that everything is where it's supposed to be. The third thing that some of you might notice is that here on the tower there's a stairway that's supposed to be there. I have that somewhere. I haven't found what box it's in from the last move. But yeah, that's supposed to be there, and it will be there again someday when I find what box I put it in when we moved from the previous house. Now, the way Lionel presented this, their plan was this would be for single train operation, single train, single direction operation, in a figure 8, an up and over. And so to get the track up to this level, 6 of these trestle pieces were included. Basically your typical trestles section, only molded in black instead of gray, and only 6 of them, 3 to get up and 3 to get down. So you're actually about twice as steep as the typical Lionel trestle set, which is steep enough as it is. But they needed to keep the footprint of the setup small enough, tried to get it into a 6x6, 8x8, area so that it didn't take up the entire living room. That's one of the problems with this, with sales of this accessory. Was the size of the area required to operate it according to Lionel's instructions. So it came as a figure 8, and so included with that would be your trestle pieces and some lock-ons and some insulated track pins. And so the way Lionel designed it is your train would come through here, and there would be an insulated section. The center rail would be insulated here on the bottom and would be insulated up here on the top. So your train, when the bridge is up, the train comes through, you climb the trestle, you come up here, and then you stop, let the drawbridge go down, and then the train goes on, and then you repeat the process. It comes down here, the train stops, the drawbridge goes up. And so you could do this either with just manual operation of pressing the button. There also are connections here for automatic train stop, a safety feature. And you could right away, you could write to Lionel for instructions on how to wire this up with relays to make all of the operation automatic, so that you didn't have to keep pressing the button over and over and over again for your display. So that's the way Lionel set it up. Let's look at that set of wiring. Alright, so let's look at the wiring the way Lionel designed it. And with that, we have 5 fair and stock clips across the accessory here. And we're going to start left to right. And starting with this first one here, this first one on the left, this one would be tied to your center rail power from your transformer. You could either send it directly from the transformer or tie it into a lock-on from your center rail. But this would be wired from track power. This is your center hot. The second connection is going to go to your common off of your transformer. And that's going to complete the circuit for the motor most of the time. However, there are stop sections when the accessory gets all the way up or all the way down. It cuts the power coming from this lock-on so that the accessory doesn't go on continuously over and over and over and over and over again. So this third connection, where I have the alligator clip here, would go to your push button that comes with the set. So your push button, one side would be wired to your common off your transformer. It would go to the push button, and then from the other side of the push button would go to lock on number 3 right here. And so when you push the button, it completes the circuit, overcoming the stop section, and then after a few seconds you can release the button, and then section 2 takes over. If you just wire it up with hot on number 1 and common on number 3 and forget about number 2 altogether, just wire it up that way, the drawbridge will go up and down continuously over and over and over and over and over and over again. So there's your 3 connections, and if you're just using your basic manual operation, not worried about anything automatic, you can operate the drawbridge with just those 3 connections. Hot, common with the push button. The other 2 connections are wired in to number 1 here, and they will distribute power if you have insulated track sections. So what you would do is number 4 here ties in and connects when the drawbridge is in the up position. Number 5 ties in when the drawbridge is in the down position. So if you insulate the center rail a few places underneath the bridge and a few places as you approach the bridge, when the drawbridge is up, it will stop the train at the top to keep the train from going across smashing into the bridge when it's up. And when it's down, it will cut the center rail power so the train doesn't smash into the bridge when it's lowered. And so that is the way Lionel designed it for a figure 8, single train, single direction, controlling the power of the center rail. However, what if you have a layout where you want 2 separate independent loops, one going over the top and one through the bottom? If you have this kind of setup, then insulating the center rail isn't going to work for you because you have to choose one power pack or the other to be the one supplying the hot to the center rail. So for that, I reversed the wiring. Let's take a look at that. In my wiring setup, the opposite happens. First of all, instead of putting insulating pins to isolate the center rail from the rest of the layout, I put in twice as many insulating pins to insulate both outer rails on multiple sections of track, so that no common power goes to the track unless it is directed by the drawbridge based on the position of the bridge. So it doesn't matter what power pack is supplying the hot for either loop. The common, it's disconnected from my common bus, and that kills the power, and that allows me to have different power options for the center rail for the trains, independent, but still have my safety stop section. So here's how that is wired. Now, in position number 1, instead of my track power, I'm going to tie this in. This is going to be common. This goes to my common bus, my ground, so to speak. So this goes to the common bus. Part number 2, instead of going to common, is now going to come from my accessory power pack. This is going to be my accessory hot. 10 to 12 volts works well. Obviously, the higher the voltage, the faster the drawbridge will go. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to burn that motor out. And also, slower is a little bit more prototypical. So you want it enough to have smooth operation, but not too fast. So I figure 10 to 12 volts is usually enough. So this goes to my accessory hot. Number 3 also comes from accessory hot, but then goes through my on-off switch, just like in the other example, so that I can provide momentary power to clear the stop sections and resume power here. So, common, accessory hot, accessory hot. So now, my 2 connections down here, instead of sending hot to the center rail, are going to be sending common to the outer rails of my insulated sections. So just as before, 1 supplies the power when the drawbridge is in the up position and 1 in the down position. So let's take a look at how that works. Okay, so I've actually turned the power up a little bit so that you can see the lighting better over my spotlights here. So you will see when the drawbridge is up, the light comes on in my dummy locomotive on the bottom, supplying power to that track. When the drawbridge is down, the light will come on my lighted caboose on top, showing that there's power to that track. When the drawbridge is in between, there is no power to either track. So let's take a look. Watch as it goes. We go down. We see the power went out on the bottom, and the power comes on the top, allowing that train to go. And then when we reverse it, power goes off on top and comes on the bottom. So that way we have a safety stop that keeps the train on the bottom from plowing into the bridge when it is lowered, and that keeps the train on the top from either plowing into the bridge when it's up or coming from the other direction from falling into the abyss when the bridge is up. So I insulate the outside rails, about 3 track sections to either side of the bridge. On the bottom section. On the top section, since we're going upgrade, I only insulated the 2 closest as we're going up the grade, and then 3 coming down the grade to overcome momentum. That gives plenty of room for the train to stop when the bridge is in operation. So as I mentioned, this accessory was cataloged from 1975 to 1981, but it probably was not manufactured during all of that time. There really aren't any variations that you see. All the colors are always the same, and it all seems to be that there was 1 large production batch, and it was in the catalog for that number of years just to sell excess inventory. It did not sell as well as MPC had imagined. And so if you think about it, if you are a beginner, the typical Christmas tree, set up the oval around the Christmas tree modeler, this accessory is going to be way too complicated for Christmas morning. But at the same time, if you have a permanent layout, then it becomes tricky as to, well, how do I use this in a situation, especially if you don't consider how you can wire it up with two different trains. Why would you have this figure 8 in here and you have to keep pressing the button and all of that? And even if you figure out, my system of using multiple loops, even then the track plan becomes an issue. Where can you find a spot to use this? I think probably the ultimate use of this accessory was with my previous layout. And show you a quick video here of how I used it before. My lower track was simply a large oval. And so the train would go around and around and around on the lower track. The upper track was a loop-to-loop, a loop at the bottom of the grade, a loop at the top of the grade. And so the train would go back and forth over that. And so with the automatic stop section, someone, like my son, could control two trains by just pressing the drawbridge button, controlling which train got to run over the bridge at which time. So with that one button control, he was happy as a lark for hours at a time, just running the drawbridge up and down and letting the lower train or the upper train go by. And so that's probably the perfect setup for this accessory. I don't have quite that much room in this layout at this house, but I am using it as a means to get from a lower level to an upper level and in between. So it'll get some use, not as much as it did on the previous layout, but it does make some sense. Another operating tip for this accessory is if you're using the contacts for the automatic stop, sometimes the contacts, the make or break contacts inside here, will either get corroded because they're brass, or just they will not be as springy as they need to be to make full contact. So I have found if you're using this on a continuous basis with regular operation, probably about every 9 months to a year or so, you need to pop in here and either clean out those contacts or make adjustments to them. For that reason, I also modified that I removed the screws that hold these sections to the base. And instead I put a little piece of wood shim there to keep that. That way, all I have to do to gain access under here is disconnect this piece of track, pull it up, and then I can just lift this whole section. You can see it wiggle there. I can just lift this section out of the way, and that gives me access to the motor and to the screws in there. This connection here there's an arm here that connects to the bridge. It is designed, they gave it a safety feature that if you accidentally bump into this, it will break free. And you can just slide that back in there. I wouldn't do that too often because it can get too loose and then you're out of position. The other problem with that is when it pops, sometimes this arm drops down through the slot and inside your base here, so then you have to disassemble everything in order to get this sucker back out in there. Otherwise, this is pretty maintenance free. Unlike MPC locomotives at the time, which used nylon gears, all the gears inside this accessory are metal, and really don't require a whole lot of lubrication. If you open one up and find that there's a lot of grease in there, it was probably added after the fact by an overzealous owner rather than at the factory. Because even in regular operation, even when it's finely tuned, this puppy does make a lot of noise. So again, I don't have the bell, but even without the bell, listen to this. It's kind of loud, but again, kind of cool as well. So, that about sums it up for the 2317. It's a cool accessory, not necessarily for everyone's layout. You need to have some creativity where you might be able to use it. And I think that's one of the reasons why there were slow sales and why it has never been reissued, because of those slow sales. But that's not because of poor quality. It's just because it's hard to find a spot on the typical layout where you can actually use it. Like I said, if you could, using a series of relays make the operation automatic, so that one train, as the train goes in, it stops and turns the bridge on, and it allows itself to go. That could be done, or you can have fun pressing the button and keeping an operator busy. But either way, you can have lots of fun with this 62317, 1975 to 1981. And so I plan to use it here on my layout that is under reconstruction at the moment. And, maybe you will find it too. As far as price, if this were a year ago, I would have said they pop up on eBay in the $50 to $100 range. Right now, accessories have really come down on the secondary market. There are probably a number of reasons for that I won't go into. But I have seen this on auction sites for less than $50 recently, so keep that in mind. So this might be a good time to buy if you are interested in the 2317. So I hope you liked the video. Like it, share it, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and until next episode, keep